This is a hospital. I mean, back in the day. Let me tell you about it. It's kind of important, and I'm bringing this up. Many people that have looked into science, all that stuff, know the roots. But I think the argument can be made here that, like, we're not a country where you can force your religion on others, right? And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of doctors. This doesn't apply to all doctors. It's the deception of the game, because they've made people have to get vaccines in order to have a job, in order to go to school, all of this stuff, right? Yet there could be the argument easily made here, because the roots go back to priests. The roots go back. It does. Let me tell you. Some people already know, but just a brief history here. The healing temples of the god Asclepius, that's the god Asclepius, in ancient Crete and Greece, were some of the most famous medical treatment hospitals ever built in the Old World. They were the first sacred structures constructed specifically for the purpose of medical care. These healing temples were named after the Greek god of wisdom, medicine, healing, rejuvenation, and physicians, known as Asclepius. Asclepius was the most important healer god of antiquity, who brought prosperity to the ancient Greeks and Cretans in the 5th and 1st centuries BC. These ancient physicians who served in these temples were also some of the first organized worldwide priesthood who traveled the world in order to work for kings and also themselves, because their medical skills were in extreme demand. They were a hereditary priesthood who at first only admitted family into the medical brotherhood. And you could see it says the history of the brotherhood. Now, again, I'm not referring to every doctor and scientist. I'm just the history. So the priesthood who at first only admitted family into the medical brotherhood and were known by various names throughout history, such as the Sons of Asclepius, the Cones, the Censures. Later in the West, such as in Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and Britain, they would be known as the Druids and the Culdees. The ancient priesthood and family had used one of the most famous and recognizable exoteric symbols ever known to man. It is the serpent, whose evidence can be witnessed all over the world to this very day, such as the many serpents and dragons carved into immortal stones in various parts of the globe, and also the serpent entwined around a staff or rod called the staff or rod of Asclepius. This is the symbol used for the modern day medical profession. This is why many of these healing temples had many non-poisonous snakes that were allowed to slither around the floors. To the patients, these snakes were used to make an impression on their minds that they were in the temple of the god Asclepius, whose embodiment was the exoteric symbol of the serpent, and to the resident initiate priests, it was a reminder of the root cause of many of the illnesses and diseases they treat, which were the result of worms. Since the rule of law was in effect and also the rule of money, these centers had to charge for their medical services just like is done today. In order to fund their commercial medical enterprises, once patients had arrived at these healing temples, they would have to offer up a sacrifice in the form of an animal that was also enjoyed as food, and afterwards they would be charged a healing fee that was then deposited with the temple priests. By keeping these teachings private, this priesthood were able to amass a large fortune and also control the market for medical care as the world's first and only trained physicians. They would also become bankers as a result of their wealth and royal connections, who then became very powerful under the protection of the Romans after they were absorbed into the Roman Empire and given special freeman and tax-free status in the Republic. From this point forward, medical care and healing went from being a family affair and being practiced by almost all families of slaves and elite like to eventually become a completely controlled industry ruled by commerce, governments, and kings. Yep, in Greece. So I think there's always been this argument about science being a religion, and people want to argue it back and forth. But see, the thing is that I don't worship the god Asclepius. So when you want to force vaccines on people in order for them to earn a living or for them to go to school, then there should be the argument made that no, the roots of all this goes back to priests and a religion. And that religion is, I don't worship the god Asclepius. Now, there's been all these arguments made, but the fact is that we can't force religion on people. And the roots, this is why I've said for years now, the roots matter. Because science likes to separate itself and say, no, we're about evidence-based. But even the roots, I'm not saying all physicians today, of course not. Not all scientists, of course not at all. But the roots do matter, because those root science and these experts then go on to say this is what everybody has to do. That violates the Constitution. And they do it again under this public health, and we have to do it. But nobody should be made to do anything. And there should be some lawyers out there that make this argument. The murderous origins of the American Medical Association. Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe some people know it. How a bloody gun duel between two doctors in Transylvania sparked a frenzy of outrage and helped create the American Medical Association. From PubMed, the secret Kappa Lambda Society of Hippocrates and the origins of the American Medical Association's principles of ethics. So, just a little bit from this article. Again, it's a fraternity, okay? That's the problem that nobody at all wants to address. But for years now, I've been saying, the universities and the secret societies is the biggest concern I have. This paper relates the neglected history of an idealistic secret medical fraternity which existed briefly, right, it wasn't briefly, in Lexington, Kentucky, because there's been so many that spurred out of that. I mean, just look at the Lawyers' Secret Society, out of Yale, and every university has them. These secret fraternities. A secret medical fraternity which existed briefly in Lexington, Kentucky during the first half of the 19th century. It was created for students in the medical department at Transylvania University, the 5th U.S. medical school founded in 1799. One goal of the fraternity was to counter the widespread dissension and often violent quarrels among doctors that characterized American medicine of that period. And to that end, it was among the first to promote Thomas Percival's Code of Medical Ethics in this country. Branches of the fraternity were established in Philadelphia and New York, where members became influential in local medical politics, but in time encountered hostility from rival physicians. The secret character of the fraternity branches was publicized and maligned during an anti-Masonic movement in this country in the 1830s, which soon led to the demise of the Philadelphia group. New York branch remained active through the 1860s. Members of both branches were among those who in 1847 established the American Medical Association and devised its principles of medical ethics. So, given the history of all of it, nobody should be made to have to do any medical treatment. So the whole thing needs to change with private companies being able to make you get medical treatments. Shouldn't have to do it. It violates the Constitution, and besides, the argument can be made secret societies and religion.